Okay, great. We will go ahead and get started with tonight's event. Thank you all so much for joining. My name is Danielle Strasburger. I am the campaign manager and one of the co-founders of Harvard Forward. I'm a graduate of the Harvard College class of 2018, and we are really excited to have you all on, as well as some amazing speakers for tonight. Tonight's event is about young elected leaders. We think it's a really integral part of the Harvard Forward platform is bringing in more young leaders into governance. And we think that goes hand in hand with the climate focus of Harvard Forward as well. So we have some great people here to speak tonight about what it's like to be a young elected leader, the benefits of being a young elected leader are, and how the young elected leaders tie into specifically some of these issues like climate change that are facing so many institutions and society as a whole today. So this event, we will talk briefly about, I'll give a little bit of an overview of what the schedule for tonight is, and then I'll hand off to our wonderful moderator, Charlotte, who will introduce herself, and the speakers will introduce themselves as well. And then we'll have a discussion. If you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A feature. We had some unfortunate circumstances in a previous event with people abusing the chat feature. Some random internet trolls got access to the link and were putting some offensive things in our chat. So the chat is closed tonight out of an abundance of caution. However, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see a little Q&A option at the lower bar. And you can use that to ask questions, which we'll see and Charlotte will see, and then we can ask them to the panelists or also answer it via the Q&A function. And then lastly, if you're not familiar with Harvard Forward, we're really excited to have you here. Harvard Forward is a campaign that was started by recent graduates of Harvard, but it's expanded to include faculty, staff, current students, older generations of alumni who are running 5 candidates for the Harvard Board of Overseers, which is the highest democratically elected board at Harvard, on a platform of climate action, inclusive governance, and responsible investing. And that inclusive governance section of it really has to do with getting more recent alumni into governance and having more access for communications to current students as well. And Jayson, who we will meet momentarily, is one of the Harvard Forward candidates. So this is a theme near and dear to our hearts at Harvard Forward. So we'll have a discussion led by Charlotte. People can ask questions, and then we'll hear briefly from some of our co-hosting organizations at the very end, who are grateful for helping put on this event and publicizing it. And then I'll give a little bit at the very end about how to get involved with Harvard Forward if you would like to do so. So without further ado, I'm going to hand off to Charlotte Alter, who is a national correspondent at Time, Harvard College class of 2012, and just had a very exciting book come out, which I will let her explain about in more detail. So take it away, Charlotte.
Thanks so much, Danielle. So the reason I'm here is because my book, which I just right here, it's called The Ones We've Been Waiting For. And it's about what Jayson and Chloe and Edgar are all doing here, which is essentially the next generation of leadership stepping up to take on real responsibility in our institutions, whether that's state assemblies or state senate or Harvard leadership or federal government in the House and in Congress. So this book is really about how, I'm going to just hold it up again so you guys can see it again, although it's backwards in a Zoom, but I promise those words say the ones we've been waiting for. This book is really about how much our current institutions are dominated by 20th century leaders with 20th century thinking. And the book really traces how a new generation of up-and-coming political leaders, it's very specifically about people in electoral politics, although I could have written this about movement politics, I could have written it about institutional politics, this is happening everywhere. But it's very specifically about how young people are kind of stepping up to challenge those entrenched boomer assumptions. So without further ado, I'm so excited to talk to our panelists today, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves because I think that you will be able to do a much better job than I can. So Chloe Maxmin, we're so excited to have you. Tell us about yourself.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Edgar, Jayson, and Charlotte, and Danielle and Shannon, and everybody joining today. My name is Chloe Maxmin. I graduated in 2015 from the college. I currently live in Maine. I am a state representative here. I got elected in 2018. I was the first Democrat to win this very rural conservative district, and I'm running for state senate this year against the highest ranking Republican in Maine. And I also co-founded Divest Harvard, which my experiences with Divest Harvard led me straight into running for office. So it's all coming together.
And we also have Edgar González Jr. Edgar, take it away.
Hey, how's everyone doing? My name is Edgar González. I am the state representative of Illinois' 21st House
Edgar.
of Chicago, Brighton Park. Say again?
Sorry, I thought you cut out for a second, but I didn't mean to interrupt you. Continue.
My bad. So it encompasses the southwest side of Chicago plus the southwest suburbs within Illinois. And I've been on the job for, it'll actually be 7 months coming the 10th of August. So, it's definitely been a very eventful year. I just graduated from the college in 2019 and happy I'm back in the city of Chicago.
Wonderful. And Jayson Toweh, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jayson. I graduated from University of Michigan in 2017 and Harvard School of Public Health in 2019. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I work for the Environmental Protection Agency, where I'm a scientist doing program evaluations on water programs. And currently, I'm one of the 5 Harvard Forward candidates. We've been running since, working on this campaign since last October, and our goals are to get Harvard to divest from fossil fuels, includes climate education, and have a more inclusive governance structure. So I'm happy to be here today to talk about this, and happy to be in this election for the next few weeks.
So all of you are young people basically infiltrating these entrenched institutions that have been dominated by people who are much older than you. I'm curious what you have found. Let's start with Chloe. In your first 2 years in office, about kind of the differences in the way you approach this, and maybe some of your older colleagues, for example.
It's such a good question. And it's a dynamic that I experience. I don't know, I'm excited to hear what Edgar and Jayson say, but it's a dynamic that I experience every day. I mean, I spent my time before running for office extremely frustrated at everybody in office because I felt like they were completely unresponsive. They never answered me in any kind of authentic way. I felt like I had no access. I felt like it didn't matter how big our movements were on the ground. It felt like they were never really reflected in any meaningful way in politics. And so part of me running for office is like, what is going on here? It can't be that hard to be responsive. And I think the biggest thing that I've seen is that traditionally when people get elected, they think that all of their power is derived from the state house or from Congress. They think that their power derives from the lobbyists, from trading votes, from what happens in their committees. But the way that I look at it, and I think that it's kind of because I'm a young person, because I don't want that kind of power. My power lies in my community, knowing that my people are with me, talking with my constituents, and always being present. And so I think really coming in with a different kind of power analysis has helped me see that politics is very broken. It definitely created the mess that we're in, but there's also still such opportunity to pave a different way forward and create a different kind of politics.
Jayson, what do you think? I know you're not quite there yet, but clearly you've been following this really closely. How do you think the people who are currently in these positions have a little bit of a different attitude than you?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I think one of the key things is that the people that are in these positions, especially with the board of overseers, are coming in with a lot of, similar and older school viewpoints. They're they're handpicked by the university, kind of so that it continues its same agenda. So they're not always as, as creative or as, looking forward to make changes. So one thing that I found interesting And we're seeing other people follow, is that being part of Harvard Forward, we really worked to come in with a full platform, with a full stance, to run a full campaign, which is not common for overseers elections. And we've seen other candidates in the election have to start taking stances and start looking at issues, because beforehand it was just you get selected and you'll just get picked based off of 10% of people that vote, and maybe they see your job title and say, oh, that's someone I'd vote for. But now we're really actually working to make a difference and come in with a plan. And I think that it's definitely making people think, and the people currently at the top are not used to this, and it's changing the game. But we're happy to be part of that, and we're looking to be successful.
Edgar, you are both the youngest Latinx state representative and the youngest Democratic state representative in the history of Illinois. What challenges have you faced? That's a lot to carry. I'm curious what it's been like for you going into this situation.
It's definitely been an honor, and it's also very humbling. Coming from Little Village, which is a predominantly Latinx neighborhood in the city of Chicago, I want to make sure that in my capacity as a state representative, I'm being representative of my people. Let me just give a little bit of history. My predecessor, she actually ran for state senate. The state senator that was there before her, because she's in the position now, was tried and convicted because of bribery and extortion by the FBI. He had been in office since 2003, and he resigned starting in 2020, even though he was still being investigated. So, many times people say, oh, well, if he's old enough, he's been many years in politics, he has a lot of experience. Age is no guarantee of experience, though I do think that youth can be very much a guarantee for innovation. It can be a guarantee for bringing in new ideas and making sure reviving the essence that is democracy. I think having predecessors or politicians like that representing my neighborhood, it doesn't really give us it doesn't really give our neighborhood a good name. And I just want to make sure that that when we do have public officials that are representing these type of neighborhoods, that we're giving our best face. And at the same time, that whenever we are legislating, whenever we are working with other people, we're making sure that everything we do is done equitably and ethically.
I think that's fascinating what you just said about how age is no guarantee of experience, but youth is a guarantee of innovation. I never really thought of it that way, but that is, I think, a really good way to put it. Chloe, I'm curious, as somebody who has been so front and center as an activist with Divest Harvard, and now kind of being on the other side, being inside the house, so to speak. I'm curious if that's changed your opinion at all about sort of what tactics work and what doesn't work as well. I mean, if you had a message, to other young activists, for example, having recently been in their shoes and now being a little bit on the other side of that, what have you learned making that transition from activist to elected?
Oh my gosh, I've learned so much. I mean, I think on just like one purely logistical note, I thought that being in office, I would be able to clearly tell what my constituents thought. I was always frustrated, like, why is no one acting on climate? And we're sending thousands of millions of emails and calls their way. But at least for me, it's genuinely difficult to tell. You get such strong input from both sides, and the importance of nuance in politics and policymaking, I appreciate it a lot more. Not to say we don't need strong policy, but I represent almost just as many people who disagree with me as agree with me, and it's my responsibility to represent everybody. I think another thing is that all my time that I spent organizing in more progressive activist movements, I really felt like I couldn't bring home that messaging and those tactics to my rural conservative hometown. I grew up and still live in a town of 1,100 people in a House district that has a 16% Republican advantage. And I could tell that the values of what progressives were talking about were so needed in rural places that have failing schools, where people are just being taxed out of their homes. No one can afford to age in home. I mean, everything is just falling apart. And we all want access to good healthcare. We want good schools. We want no student debt, but we're voting Republican all of the time. So, for me, a big part of this work has been translating progressive values to rural conservative places and trying to rebuild our stronghold here, because it's the rural vote that got Trump elected. It's the rural vote that swings state legislatures red, and we have to really think about it. So, and it's a completely like I'm not sure I could go back to my previous self, because I feel like it leaves behind my community. It doesn't leave behind all communities, but it leaves behind my community. And so I've just rerouted myself in a different place.
Edgar, I'm curious to hear from you on this. You've been focused on issues like unions and veterans and Social Security, which is not, frankly, what a lot of young electeds are necessarily focused on. How does your age inform the kinds of issues that you choose to focus
on? My district is it's a pretty young district. I'd say it's one of the youngest districts in the whole state of Illinois. At the same time, it's one of the most Latino districts in the state of Illinois. So I had to balance, in a sense, many of these demographics because many times the needs of these demographics can vary a lot. At the same time, I believe about 45% of my district lies in the city. The other 55% lie in the suburbs, and the suburbs, many times, they have a very different need than those in the city. The parts in the city are a bit more and have historically been underrepresented, underserved. So my way of approaching any legislation that I propose, it needs to come from, how I like to say, it needs to come from the hood. It needs to come from my neighbors. For example, with unions, my parents. I come from a union family. My dad is an operating engineer in a local union. He works at a hospital, so he's an essential worker. So I have an essential worker in my family, and many people in my district, like on my block, are essential workers. My mom, she used to be in the union when I was a little kid, when I was still in school. So having that experience, coming from a working class family, at the same time representing a majority working class district, I have to, you can't really come up with legislation on your own. You need the input of the neighborhood. You need the input of the community. I don't want to be telling people what they need. I need them to be telling me what they need. At the same time, sometimes, people don't know what they need. Sometimes they don't have the time to focus on that. They're just trying to get day by day, and they're just trying to get enough money for the next day to get food or pay for rent or whatever. So we had to deal with these, real circumstances. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we educate our neighbors. For example, Illinois is planning this November. There's going to be a referendum on the fair tax, so that Illinois can have a progressive tax, progressive income tax. In the state right now, it's flat. Many people just by hearing that taxes, okay, it must be something bad. I don't want that. But we're trying to let people know, this actually will be beneficial for the neighborhoods. It'll be beneficial for communities like ours. For our communities, there'll be almost like a 99% tax cut for our communities. But it's sometimes people don't understand that. So being able to put your ear to the ground, being able to talk with your neighbors and your constituents, I think that's one of the most important things. When you're approaching what you want to do and what you want to work on.
Jayson, I'm curious, what do you think is the connection between, why is it important to have this rising generation of young leaders represented in a private institution like Harvard? We've been talking a lot about public accountability in various bodies of government, but what does this mean for a private institution?
Well, yeah, no, it's definitely really important. So specifically, especially at Harvard, which is, it's one of the world's most well-known universities, and it has the largest endowment. So it comes with such a huge influence. It's been around for over, for almost 400 years. And all the individuals that came from there, a lot of them are working in government or in other positions of power. So it's key having this young engagement at the university, because Harvard's, it's not just Cambridge, it's not just Massachusetts, it's, you know, has impacts around the world. And it's key to infuse a lot of these young, new, progressive ideas in that institution as we help bring up leaders of the future, but also help inform current leaders. And this whole movement, you know, the whole, you know, work we've been doing at Harvard Forward has really shown that there is a demand, that it is really key. And I think that not just in the Board of Overseers, but you'll see a lot more youth and younger engagement in all facets at the university. And ideally, as we are successful in this, more universities will follow suit, and we'll have young alums in governance structures, in administrative positions to really help transform them for the future.
So Chloe, you've been at this for a while, and you've tried to make change at Harvard and now in Maine. And I'm curious, how do the two compare? You know, was it harder to change structures at Harvard, or is it harder to change structures and change policies in a state government?
Mm. Well, the answer to that question so depends on what the goal is of the movements. I mean, at Harvard, Harvard may divest one day. Hopefully, we're all working towards that, but I'm not holding my breath. And so when we were organizing on campus, I always saw our metric of success as the movement that we were building, you know, how the folks that we were engaging in our actions, in a conversation about climate justice, in a conversation about Harvard's privilege and how it uses that privilege in a time of such deep crisis and injustice. And so, you know, by that metric, I think we like divest Harvard, and the fossil fuel divestment conversation is still going, and that's been pretty successful. And that if you talk about building a movement, a political conversation in Maine, I think it's actually really similar. I mean, I'm not super jaded. I am super jaded. I don't expect to go into politics and fix all of the problems that I see. You know, I've sponsored bills that have gotten whittled down, and it's the process of compromise. We have to keep pushing, keep putting forward strong legislation, no doubt. But you know, it's a system that's built a certain way. And so my metric is, what do our movements look like? Are we having different conversations about what politics should be in this day and age? Are we bringing in new folks into this conversation? Are we building something that lasts beyond just an election day, just beyond a candidate? And I think we're doing that here. So in some ways, they're actually maybe pretty identical.
Jayson, I'm curious, you know, the Harvard Forward platform is bringing together a lot of different issues, but most importantly, climate justice and inclusive governance. What are the connections between those two issues? Can you have one without the other, and how do they reinforce each other?
Yeah, so climate justice and inclusive governance are really interconnected. And part of that is because if you're really trying to have an adequate, you know, governance, and, you know, that you're running, you will then have to take a stance on climate justice, because the individuals that are, you know, impacted or are championing the cause and advocating for those that are need to be at the table. I mean, so climate change is what will be the biggest, you know, threat to humanity in the 21st century. If we're going to make it out of this century, we have to make a change on it. And you really need actors at the table. And by excluding individuals who are representing, you know, these, you know, climate justice and advocating against these impacts, you're basically not having a full inclusive governance. So by bringing these issues, we can now thoroughly address them. And as we stated, one way is through fossil fuel divestment, but even so, also just responsibly investing these funds into fields that are taking a stance, that are, you know, are actively helping reduce this crisis. And, you know, that's why, if we have a fully inclusive governance, we can take the stance and have that happen.
So we're almost at time, but I wanted to end before we take questions from the audience. I wanted to give you guys a chance to tell us a little bit about what you wish you'd known before you got involved in politics at your age. Any kind of advice that you would maybe give to other people who are thinking of stepping into the arena, particularly people who are in the beginning of their career and might not have the sort of funding or networks or established careers that maybe older people who are getting started in politics might have. So Edgar, why don't we start with you? What advice would you have for another young person who's trying to get elected to office?
I think definitely one of the biggest, the thing that in a sense like hit me like almost a culture shock once I got involved in politics was, there are just so many people involved that at one point, it's going to become impossible to meet every single person that you need to meet that's relevant to a certain situation, an issue, or whatnot. But you just have to do everything in your power to be able to meet all these people. At the same time, once you're, rubbing shoulders with, these like giants or dinosaurs in the legislature, once you meet, we're rubbing shoulders with dinosaurs in the legislature, it becomes just remember where you're coming from, just, like stay grounded, stay humble. I think, like my mom never lets me, forget like where I'm coming from. So, it's always a lot easier for me to stay humble. But, at the same time, it's, there's just so many things happening. We're in such a crossroads, and just never lose sight of why you started in the first place, why you started getting involved, why you want to help people. I think if you have that question in your pocket at all times, I think you'll be very successful.
What about you, Chloe?
Yeah, I really resonate with and echo what Edgar said. I think, yeah, ditto that. I think one thing, like I've often felt imposter syndrome being a young person in politics and sitting in rooms, people have studied this policy for years and being like, I just learned about this, I don't know if I should speak, but I think it's so important for young people to be in office for a different perspective to be reflected in policy making, and the experience of youth and what we bring to the table is just as valid as all those years of policy experience that other folks bring. And just I wish looking back that I had felt that a little bit more strongly in my early days there.
Jayson, what about you?
One thing I'll say is that I know a lot of people think that people who run for office or elected, are coming from like a certain breed of people. What I'll say is that anyone can govern. And honestly, a lot of times, the people that aren't trying to seek office, when I say trying to seek, meaning like who have known that they wanted that for the longest, might be some of the best candidates. I can at least say in my experience that I've always tailored my background as an environmentalist, and I've worked in environmental science, and I've just, went really strong in my career for that. But it's such a key thing for me that, when I found Harvard Forward in a campaign that I really was engaged with, I just went at full steam ahead. So one thing I can say is that you might not think that you know everything, or you have a knowledge of each issue, but if there is something you really care about and that you will fight for, then I suggest you running for a position that you can advocate on that, and that will help you get through the times, the long hours, the tireless nights, because you're really running for something that you care about and that you want to see changed.
Great. So we've got some really exciting questions from the audience. And I might not be able to get to all of them, but I'll try to get to most of them. Okay, here's one. Felicia says, I wonder if people currently in positions of government power act differently because their incentives are different. Is it because they stand to lose more money or influence or whatever than someone who is new and not established? So this is a question for you all. How do you make sure your ideals don't get broken down by the system of incentives that already exists? Jayson, do you want to take that first?
Yeah. So I guess the key thing is just to know that, like I said, be very mission driven in what you're trying to accomplish, and not try to waver by, these other, corporate entities. So at least one benefit, since we're all relatively, young, we haven't had as much time getting established and entrenched in a lot of these entities. I can at least speak that I know that, for my job, just to be running for this, since I work for the federal government, I had to list if I have any ties to anything. And I said, well, the great thing is I have no investments and no ties, so I'm able to just be fully engaged on these issues and not having backwards. So I guess my advice is just stay mission driven, and if it looks like something could be compromising, it probably is, and just really think about that before getting forced or anything.
Chloe and Edgar, anything to add to that? How do you keep yourself from getting broken down by the systems of incentives that are that you're often presented with? Maybe you, Edgar?
Yeah, sure. I think when you start to construct your legislative agenda, start constructing what exactly do I want to do, what do I want to accomplish. Usually, what really helps from the very beginning is to make sure that whatever it is that you're going to be working on, that everybody knows beforehand. Because I think there comes a point where people just, I guess the word is kind of like buy your vote, like, try to influence you, trying to trying to let you know, like, oh, vote this way, vote that way. That might be detrimental and or counteractive to what you want to accomplish. If you make very clear from the very beginning what you want to work on, what your guiding principles are, I think one, it makes it a lot more difficult for you to stray away from that, and it makes it a lot harder too for people who want you to vote in a different way than what you intend to vote on. It keeps you it keeps you on the path towards what you actually want to accomplish. I think the incentives definitely become different once you become an elected official. But at the same time, the saying that the more things change, the more they stay the same. In the end, like, for example, like, I run every 2 years. Like, that's the term. I think, like, at a point, things are pretty much the same. So that the incentives, in a sense, stay the same. But like I said, if you stick to that guiding principle, I think it pretty much it makes sure that you stay grounded in what you actually want to do.
Chloe, what do you think?
Yeah, the theme of being grounded is so important. I mean, there's 2 different instances where I've seen people who I respect not follow their ideals, and they've done that for 2 reasons. One is because it's like, oh, that's my friend, like, like, there's relationship there, and they're deriving their validity from that relationship instead of what their community wants. So, like, if you spend all day with these people, they become your community, and you kind of lose sight of where you come from. So I think there's that personal relationship thing that happens. Oh, I'm going to vote for his bad bill, and he's going to vote for my good bill later on. Like, that has happened. And then the other time people don't, vote the way that they should, is when they get harassed. The other side has some vicious tactics that really can sway people, and they get scared and they change their vote. So, so for me, the solution to that is, what Edgar was saying earlier, is staying rooted in your community. What's most important to me is what my community thinks, and if my community is going to stand by me when I vote a certain way, and if I can explain it to them. So, just gotta, rerouting.
So we've got a lot of great questions here, but I'm going to focus in on the ones that are specifically about Harvard climate policy, because that's really why we're here. So this is a question for Jayson. Have you seen mostly young alumni voting for the Harvard Forward slate, or has your platform had an appeal across generations?
So I'd say it has a appeal across generations. So one of the great things that we were able to do is pre the pandemic was a lot of in-person events. So we like to speak with a lot of individuals and also got a lot of volunteers. And we, during the events that I did in Atlanta and some in San Diego, I was able to meet a lot of great individuals from all age groups that were really impactful. And some of our main supporters um, were individuals from classes in the 60s and 70s, sometimes past that. We have seen a lot of engagement from young alumni. So as I say, I message my friends and talk about, the campaign. A lot of them are like, oh, I've already voted. This is my first time voting, things like that. And I think that's, really strong that we're able to, get interest from all generations and really increase voter turnout. So it's been great to see that.
One more question for you, Jayson. Obviously, Harvard Forward is trying to break into the old guard in some way with this campaign and this platform. And Chloe, please chime in on this too, because I know you have a lot of experience with this as well. But Jayson, how difficult and intimidating is this old guard? Have any of the really established people reached out to you? Does it feel combative, or does it feel like there might be room for you and other Harvard Forward people at the table?
Yeah, so me being completely candid, I think the whole process, even if we can't say combative, it's definitely, we feel like a lot of times are unwelcome. Just running this like getting on the ballot itself, and I have been quoted saying, was very arduous. It was just difficult, and for all intents and purposes, made for us not to be on. And honestly, I'm surprised that we were able to jump through those barriers, because it took a lot of work because it made it so difficult. And even still, once we've gotten on, there's various instances, whether it's subtle or not subtle, where we've had, people in these established positions trying to downgrade us, or, say things are false, maybe it's we're not as experienced, or we don't really have the capabilities. And it's like we have 13 degrees between the 5 candidates. So we have a lot of the capabilities. Or they'll say that, we're funded by major interests, and we're just a grassroots campaign that wants Harvard to take action on these issues. And a lot of that, we see that is because they're scared of us shaking up the establishment. I mean, it's like I said, the board overseas is one of the most selective and elite groups. And the people that get, selected on this have, really strong ties to the university, whether it's, donations or colleagues with individuals, or just notoriety. So we're really shaking up things, and it can be intimidating to have this group of youngsters basically come in and shake up a system that's been in place for hundreds of years. But I find that, basically I say is the more that people are talking about us, good or bad, is great, because that means that, they're worried, and that means that we have a strong chance of pushing through and, getting a seat at the table and being in the room where things happen. So,
Chloe, what do you think, as somebody who's also engaged with this during your time at Harvard, and you're now on the other side of it? How easy is it to change the old guard?
Well, I was a little bit worried about how my emotions would impact how I answer questions about Harvard, because I don't care about Harvard's old guard anymore. I think they should be absolutely ashamed of themselves for how they have acted in a time of unprecedented social injustice. What I care about is what the Harvard Forward slate candidates are doing, what Edgar is doing, what all of the amazing young folks that Harvard has educated are doing to create the new guard. The old guard is behind. It's got to follow us now. Obviously we need the corporation and the board of overseers for Harvard to divest, for Harvard to change its policies, and I hope one day that happens. But I've lost all respect for them, and I think the conversation belongs squarely on the shoulders of its students and alumni.
So I think that's a great place to ask our final question, which is, if we're talking about this rising generation, the new guard, as you put it, Chloe, I want to hear from each of you about, what do you think are the 2 or 3 things that really define how this new guard is thinking about the future and how they want to use power differently than the people who are currently in power, than the people they're replacing. Edgar, let's start with you. What is different about the new guard?
I'd say definitely and very frankly, we hate the rules. We hate how they're written. We hate what they are. And at this point, many of the traditions, the old norms that many have followed by, at some point, it kind of gets annoying in a sense. So it's not that necessarily that we won't play by the rules. Like there will be rules. There'll just be new ones and ones that are grounded in equity, and making sure that our communities are being served. At the same time, I think something that distinguishes us, and it's just by, I guess, by the times, because of the advent of social media, and our access to technology, now more than ever, I think it's easier for us to get our message across, especially to other young people. I think we also, as young people, as young legislators, as young candidates, we need to do a better job of, at the same time, of reaching younger people. And it's a lot easier for us because we can do it on Facebook, on Instagram, TikTok, or whatever. At the same time, make sure that at the same time we're including people who might be in the old guard or think that's the only way of doing things, and telling that, what, there is another way. It's a better way. And, and just trying to, kind of like, kind of make sure they blend, they mix gradually into this new system that young people want to create and want to institute. Many of the institutions how they work right now, it's you can definitely tell that they weren't made with people like myself, people that come from underserved Black and Brown communities. Those institutions weren't made for us. So I think now, we're able to express that, and I think that's what kind of makes us different from the old guard.
Chloe, what do you think? How would you help us understand this new guard?
Yeah, the words that come to mind is that what the old guard calls idealism, the new guard calls necessity, and we're not afraid to say it. We're not afraid to articulate what is needed, what is right, and what is wrong in this moment. I think that the expertise of youth is to have this moral clarity and to push hard for it on every front that we can, and to build that power.
Jayson, what about you? Let's end with you.
Yeah, I think this new guard's come in, and it's basically we just come in at any time knowing ready to make changes. We're not waiting for certain things. We're not saying, once I get to this point, then I'll do this and that. We know that no matter how young, whether we're 12, 13, or 40, that we can make an impact. And I think it's a huge thing. And then lastly, I'd say I think this new guard knows how to coalition build. So I talked about this being a grassroots campaign. I think we know how to, reach and draw connections from different groups, from different generations, from different communities, to really work together and understand. Like I said, my time in Harvard Forward, we've seen support from current students to, graduates from the 50s, and even individuals from the current Board of Overseers that are, supporting the things that we've done. So I think coalition building is a huge thing, and will really be useful for this new guard to help transition into the future as they take up new leadership positions.
Wow. Well, thank you, Chloe and Jayson and Edgar, for this fascinating discussion. Danielle, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much, Charlotte, Chloe, Jayson, and Edgar. That was fascinating to hear and really inspiring. And thank you all for being on and joining us tonight. We will hear in just a moment from some of the Harvard groups that helped co-host tonight. and from a representative on their group about what their group is and why they care about what we were discussing tonight in the Harvard Forward campaign. But briefly, I want to echo Jayson's comment about how it really takes a wide coalition and a wide range of people to support new voices and support changing in directions. And we've heard from many alumni. Jayson said we had a volunteer from the class of 1951 who was collecting petition signatures in her retirement home, and just absolutely incredible people who were involved in campus activism when they were on campus in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. So this is really a tradition of pushing for change at Harvard, and we're honored to have the support of so many people. And if you would like to be a part of the Harvard Forward campaign, I will put some information into the chat, but I'll send out follow-up information after the call as well. But specifically, we have a phone bank tomorrow evening. We're doing it jointly with Yale Forward, and we'll be calling Harvard alumni and trying to get them to vote. We have less than 2 weeks left in this election, and last year, fewer than 15% of alumni voted. So we're really trying to increase civic participation, and direct outreach to people is huge. So please join us for a phone bank tomorrow. Even if you're not a Harvard alum, we'd love to have you join. And I'll be sharing a document with a bunch of types of outreach you can do in as little as 15 minutes. Just super easy to get on your LinkedIn and see who you have connections with.
Hey, Danielle, Can I ask a question? I'm going to expose myself as very uninformed, but I have no idea how to vote in this election, and I am an alum. Can you please tell me?
I would love to tell you. Great question. So it is super easy to vote. As of last year, you can now vote online. So Harvard's finally in the 21st century. You can get full instructions on how to vote at harvardforward.org/vote. But basically, the quickest answer is search in your inbox, whatever email Harvard has on file for you. Search Harvard 2020 elections. Mine was in my promotions tab. It's gone to people's spam. They'll give you your code to vote, so you don't need a Harvard key or alumni login. You take that code, click on the link, put it in, select our wonderful 5 candidates, and look at the HAA endorsed director candidates as well that Harvard Forward's endorsed, and then hit submit, and that's it. You can just 2 minutes. Great. Thank you, Charlotte. Okay, and now I will turn over really briefly popcorn round, hearing from our co-hosts. And we're going to have, I think Shannon should have made them all able to unmute themselves and speak. But first up, Luz from Fuerza.
Yes. Sorry, let me just start my video. Hi, everyone. My name is Luz, and I am the co-president of Fuerza Latina. And so based on the questions they gave us on why our group sort of cares about climate change and why I personally care about climate justice. So I'm originally from Florida, and over the years I've seen how tropical storms and hurricanes have been hitting us more and more often, and its impending threat has definitely been very severe, not only in Florida and to me personally in my community, but also to communities in the Caribbean, and also the impact of droughts on Latin America and immigration. And I think this is a very important topic to a lot of our members who might be connected to it, whether it be in their own communities or whether their families back home. And so, and also with young leadership, I think it's very important to have people there who understand our perspectives, who understand sort of our concerns over climate justice and climate change. And so, yeah.
Great, thank you so much. All right, next up we have Nadine from the Harvard College Palestine Solidarity Committee.
First of all, thank you all for such an incredible panel. This was really informative. I really enjoyed it. But more about me, I'm here on behalf of the Harvard College Palestine Solidarity Committee. We're a student organization that sort of sheds light on the conflict that's happening in Palestine and Israel, and tries to provide resources and events that sort of cover that. And I think that really aligns well with climate justice and the fight for divestment, and the importance of young leaders in the world, not just the United States. I think for the PSC in specific, Palestine is going through a lot of different struggles in terms of climate justice and in terms of lack of water resources. And I think learning about how the United States, one of the most powerful countries in the world and a country that influences the region so much, is one of our main objectives. And who better to do that than young leaders and people who really are learning and are interested in what's happening around the world and are sort of like you guys were talking about, not tied to that like old guard and where we were in the past. But once again, thank you so much. And I hope that Harvard Forward is going to have more events in the future that we can be a part of.
Great, thank you, Nadine. Okay, next up we have Aria from the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences Environmental Action Team.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Thank you again for the wonderful panel. It was very fun. I'm a part of the Environmental Action Team. I'm the treasurer. What we essentially do is we're a group of graduate students interested in helping protect the environment out of a deep, abiding love for the natural world. We have 4 different subgroups. The latest and one which I'm most interested in is the environmental justice one. So we host a variety of events to either get out the vote or engage Harvard students in ways that they can help the sustainability goal. It was a wonderful event, and I look forward to collaborating with Harvard Forwards in the future. Thank you all.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, Jessica from the Harvard Graduate Council.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for the really thoughtful discussion. My name is Jessica. I'm the Vice Chair of Community Engagement from the Harvard Graduate Council, which represents the 12 graduate and professional schools at Harvard when advocating on behalf of graduate student interests before our university's central administrators, including the president and the provost's office, The Harvard Graduate Council has endorsed Harvard Forward's platform, so thanks again, Jayson, for sharing your team's great work. Additionally, in collaboration with MIT's Graduate Student Council, we've been doing advocacy work around environmental sustainability with our Massachusetts state representatives. And this is really thanks to all the graduate students who've made it clear that our community cares about and prioritizes these issues. The last thing I wanted to share tonight is that the Harvard Graduate Council is holding elections for half of our positions this fall. So to all those young leaders out there, if you're a graduate student at Harvard, you're eligible to run. We invite you to engage with us and please make your voice heard.
Great, thank you. Okay, next up we have Amechi from the Harvard Black Community Leaders.
Hi, I first wanted to thank you all for hosting this amazing panel. So I am one of the co-chairs of the Black Community Leaders, and our work in providing Black visibility and justice on campus, we believe, is inherently tied to climate justice. I personally believe that environmental racism is a topic not always considered serious among society, but Black people and like those in our community who are disproportionately affected by climate change as areas particularly become urbanized, and also impoverished Black Americans who are left to suffer from the effects of climate change are all connected in our fight for visibility and creating justice and safety for Black lives around campus and I guess even the Boston area. In terms of young leadership with Black students, I believe being underrepresented on campus, that our role as community leaders can uplift and embrace community while also pushing forward, I guess, initiatives with you and other groups around campus that help, increase our power and impact for the rest of Harvard. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And next up, we have someone from the Harvard Law School Asia Law Society. I have 2 names here. I'm not sure who was going to speak, so whoever it was, feel free to chime in.
Hi, it's April Xu. I am a co-president of the Harvard Asia Law Society House. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight, and we're really happy to be collaborating with Harvard Forward. So a little bit about House. We are an organization based at HLS. So we do a bunch of events, both academic and professional ones, and also we host a bunch of, delegation trips each year, and different Asian countries, and we talk about legal and political and policy issues. So we believe that climate change in the US sometimes might be seen as a more domestic issue, but then we're really hoping to also make that collaboration on a more international comparative politics and law scale as well. So really looking forward to continuing this collaboration. Nice meeting you all.
Thank you, April. And lastly, we have Aiden from the Harvard College Impact Investing Group.
Hey everyone, my name's Aiden, and I'm the president of the Impact Investing Group. Our club basically works to educate students about the power of impact investing, connect students with leaders in the field of impact investing, and connect students to opportunities to work in the field, largely through research projects at HBS or with local startups. But climate justice is incredibly vital to our group and impact investing as a whole. Divesting is one incredibly important step towards climate justice. But then there's kind of a whole other side of the coin, which is focused on, reinvesting that in a sustainable way that Harvard can really be proud of. So, we're really happy to co-sponsor this event. Thank you so much. It's been great to hear so many young leaders who are fighting for climate justice and who are fighting for Harvard to take a stand. So really appreciate it. And it's been great hearing the discussion tonight.
Great, thank you, Aiden. We also had a few other groups, the Harvard Public Opinion Project, Fossil Fuel Divest Harvard, Seneca, and the HLS Environmental Law Society, who are not speaking but did help co-host, so big thanks to them. And that is a wrap on our event for tonight. As a final plug, join our phone bank tomorrow. Take 15 minutes of your days in these last 13 days we have. August 18th is a deadline. Every vote counts. We've heard past elections have been decided by as few as 10 votes. So every Harvard grad please get out the word. It takes 2 minutes to vote online. You can learn more about how to vote in our candidates and platform and how to get involved at harvardforward.org. Feel free to email me, Danielle@harvardforward.org. And just last but certainly not least, a massive thank you to Charlotte for her amazing job moderating. Please go out, buy her book, read it. I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful read. And thank you to our wonderful panelists, Jayson, Chloe, and Edgar. And I hope you all have a great night. Thank you very much.